I'm Jessica Mitchell, 28 years old, and my family has always told me I take up too much space. At our last family dinner, I accidentally bumped the table, spilling my drink. As water spread across my mother's pristine tablecloth, my father sighed and said, "You've always taken up too much space, Jess." Everyone laughed. My mother, my sister, even my aunt. Everyone except me. That comment cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. In that moment, I knew I had to leave. Before I dive into what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like you didn't fit in with your own family. Trust me, this journey from that painful dinner table to building my own table 3,000 miles away will show you that sometimes the most hurtful moments can lead to your greatest transformation. Growing up in suburban Boston, my childhood was comfortable by most standards. We had a 4-bedroom colonial in a good school district, summer trips to Cape Cod, and all the trappings of upper-middle-class success. From the outside, the Mitchells were the picture-perfect family. My father, Richard, was an executive at a financial firm, climbing the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency. My mother, Catherine, maintained our home with military precision, everything in its place, always company-ready. And then there was my older sister Amber, the golden child. Amber was everything I wasn't. 3 years my senior, she collected achievements like trophies. Straight, a student, captain of the tennis team, class president, and conventionally beautiful with our mother's slender frame and perfect posture. I, on the other hand, was the square peg in our family of round holes. While Amber competed in math tournaments, I was sketching in the margins of my notebooks. While she played classical piano, I was making sculptures from found objects in the backyard. Her room was a shrine to academic and athletic achievements. Mine looked like an art supply store had exploded. "Jessica, must your projects always make such a mess?" My mother would sigh as I worked on papier-mâché creations at the kitchen table. I'd shrink a little, trying to contain my materials to a smaller area, trying to contain myself. When I was 12, I became fascinated with wildlife photography. I'd spend hours in our backyard, waiting to capture images of birds and squirrels. I saved my allowance for months to buy a decent camera, and when I finally got it, I was ecstatic. I set up a small darkroom in a corner of the basement, carefully arranging my equipment to take up as little space as possible. "Your little hobby is cluttering up the basement," my father commented one day. "We need to store the Christmas decorations somewhere, you know." The following weekend, my darkroom was dismantled and replaced with neatly labeled storage bins of holiday ornaments. My photographs were stacked in a box, pushed to the back of my closet. In high school, I discovered theater. Not as an actress, I was too self-conscious for that, but as a set designer. I loved creating worlds from scratch, transforming plywood and paint into forests, living rooms, castle interiors. I would bring sketches and miniature mock-ups home to work on them. "Must these things invade the living room?" my mother asked, stepping around a small-scale model of a Victorian parlor I'd built for our school's production of The Importance of Being Earnest. I apologized and carried it to my room, where I worked on it at my cramped desk. Paintbrushes balanced precariously on my windowsill. For my junior year science project, I built a functioning ecosystem in a series of connected glass containers. It was ambitious and messy and took over a corner of our garage. I worked on it every day after school, monitoring the delicate balance of plants, water, and small creatures. "This project is taking over the garage," my father complained 2 weeks in. "Your mother can barely park her car." "I just need a few more days," I pleaded. "It's almost done, and it counts for half my grade." "You always need more space, more time, more attention," he said with that familiar edge of impatience. "The world doesn't revolve around you, Jessica." I completed the project in my bedroom, which was completely impractical. I got a B+ instead of the A I'd been targeting. My teacher noted that while the concept was excellent, the execution lacked some of the refinement she'd expected from me. How could I explain that refinement requires space? As an adult, I rationalized these criticisms as just how families talk to each other. Doesn't everyone get their rough edges filed down by the people who love them? Isn't that what family is for, to keep you humble? To remind you that you're not special? I told myself it was normal. that I was being too sensitive. I almost believed it. The family dinner that changed everything was supposed to be a celebration of Amber's latest achievement, a promotion to senior marketing director at her firm. At 31, she was the youngest person to hold the position in the company's history, a fact my parents had mentioned to everyone from their neighbors to the cashier at the grocery store. I'd been dreading the dinner all week. These family gatherings always left me feeling smaller, diminished, like I was still the awkward teenager trying to find her place. But I was determined to be supportive. I'd even spent the previous weekend crafting a wooden business card holder for Amber, inlaid with her initials in maple and walnut. It wasn't my best work, my apartment wasn't set up for proper woodworking, but I was proud of it. The evening started like all Mitchell family gatherings. My mother's immaculate home, the formal dining room table set with the good china, the smell of her signature roast filling the house. My father was pouring wine, my sister was showing off pictures of the corner office that came with her promotion. My mother was arranging serving dishes with geometric precision. The view from the office is incredible, Amber was saying, swiping through photos on her phone. You can see the entire harbor from the windows. That's what happens when you apply yourself, my father said, beaming with pride. Hard work pays off. I took a small sip of wine and tried to join the conversation. I've got some exciting news, too. I started an apprenticeship with Frank at Riverside Woodworking. He's teaching me traditional joinery techniques. That's nice, dear, my mother said absently, not looking up from the green beans she was arranging. Amber, tell us about the team you'll be managing. I tried again during the main course. The apprenticeship might lead to a position in their custom furniture division. Frank says my design sensibility is unique. Is there money in that? My father asked, raising an eyebrow. Seems like more of a hobby than a career path. There absolutely is, I started to explain. Custom furniture. Amber's company has an incredible benefits package, my mother interrupted. Tell them about the retirement matching, honey. And so it went. Every attempt to share my life was derailed, redirected back to Amber's achievement, or cut short with dismissive questions. I felt myself shrinking in my chair, taking smaller and smaller bites, speaking less and less. When I reached for the bread basket, I misjudged the distance. My hand caught the edge of my water glass, tipping it over. The water splashed across the table, soaking the tablecloth and dripping onto the floor. I jumped up, grabbing my napkin to stem the flow. I'm so sorry, I said, mortified. Let me help clean it up. My father sighed deeply. That familiar sound of disappointment that I'd heard my entire life. You've always taken up too much space, Jess. Then came the laughter. My mother's polite titter. My sister's louder chuckle. Even my aunt joined in with her raspy smoker's laugh. I froze, napkin in hand, water still dripping onto the hardwood floor. I'd heard variations of this comment my entire life, but something about this moment, the casual cruelty, the unified laughter, the complete dismissal of me as a person crystallized in my mind. In slow motion, I watched them laughing, their faces distorted in my watery vision, and a sudden clarity washed over me. This wasn't love. This wasn't family teasing. This was years of emotional abuse that I'd normalized, accepted, even participated in. I forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes, and dabbed at the spill half-heartedly. Clumsy me, I murmured. But inside, a storm was brewing. The conversation resumed without missing a beat, flowing around me as if I were a rock in a stream. I sat through dessert in silence, nodding occasionally, laughing when it seemed appropriate, but I wasn't really there anymore. My mind was elsewhere, taking inventory of every slight, every dismissive comment, every time I'd been made to feel that my existence itself was an inconvenience. When I finally excused myself, claiming an early morning the next day, no one protested. My mother accepted the kiss I placed on her cheek, my father gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder, and Amber barely looked up from her phone where she was showing our aunt pictures of her new condo. In my car, parked under the maple tree I'd climbed as a child, I sat with my hands gripping the steering wheel. Tears streamed down my face. But they weren't sad tears. They were the kind that come with revelation, with a truth so long buried that its emergence feels like both pain and release. I started the engine with a newfound determination. I needed to find a place where I could take up all the space I needed. When I returned to my apartment that night, I saw it with new eyes. My tiny one-bedroom in Somerville wasn't much, but it was mine. Every surface held evidence of my passion. Wood shavings in the corners, half-finished sketches on the coffee table, chisels and gouges carefully arranged on a pegboard I'd installed over my desk. A small workbench stood in what should have been my dining area, currently hosting a jewelry box I was building from black walnut. I'd discovered woodworking 3 years earlier, at 25, during a particularly low point. After another disappointing family Christmas, where my gift of handmade cards had been politely acknowledged while Amber's present of expensive scotch for our father had earned rapturous praise, I'd wandered into a small workshop near my apartment. The smell of sawdust and varnish had drawn me in, and there I met Frank. Frank Russo was 72, with hands gnarled like the wood he loved, and a shock of white hair he kept tied back in a stubby ponytail. He'd been crafting furniture for nearly 5 decades and had opened Riverside Woodworking after retiring from a larger cabinet-making company. He let me watch him work that day, explaining each step as he fitted dovetail joints with precision that seemed magical to me. "You want to try?" he'd asked, holding out a small block of pine and a marking knife. My first attempts were clumsy, earning good-natured ribbing from Frank, but he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. "You've got a good eye," he told me, "and patience. Most folks want to rush, but you take your time. That's rare." I started visiting the shop regularly, sweeping up sawdust and organizing tools in exchange for lessons. Frank became the mentor I'd always craved, someone who saw my creativity as an asset rather than an inconvenience. Under his guidance, I learned to turn wood on a lathe, to carve intricate patterns, to understand the personality of different woods, and how to work with their unique characteristics. "Cherry's temperamental," he'd say, running a weathered hand over a board. "Like people, wood's got its own personality. You can't force it to be something it's not." When I told my family about my woodworking, they treated it like another one of my phases. "Remember when you were into photography?" my mother had said with an indulgent smile. "And before that, it was theater sets. You do bounce around, don't you?" But this was different. Working with wood centered me in a way nothing else had. There was an honesty to it, a dialogue between craftsman and material. Wood doesn't lie or judge or dismiss. It simply is, and it responds to how you treat it. Sitting in my apartment after the disastrous dinner, I opened my laptop and began researching woodworking communities across the country. If I was going to make a break, I wanted it to be meaningful. I wasn't just running away. I was running towards something better. After hours of searching, a name kept appearing in forums and articles. Northwest Artisan Woodworks in Portland, Oregon. Their apprenticeship program was highly regarded, and they specialized in sustainable, innovative design, exactly the direction I wanted to take my work. Their Instagram feed showcased breathtaking pieces that blended traditional techniques with contemporary aesthetics. It was nearly 2 in the morning when I filled out the online application, attaching photos of my best pieces, the jewelry box, a small side table with curved legs, a set of nesting bowls I'd turned from maple. Frank had helped me document my work properly, insisting that I needed a portfolio even if I never used it. "Craftsmanship deserves to be recorded," he'd said. I hit submit without letting myself overthink it. The position required a 6-month commitment starting in 4 weeks. It was impossible, impractical, and exactly what I needed. 2 days later, I received a phone call from Diana Vega, the master woodworker who ran the Portland workshop. "Your joining techniques need refinement," she said without preamble, "but your design sense is unique. We have an opening starting next month. Are you interested?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Absolutely yes." "It's not glamorous," she warned. "Long hours, basic stipend, lots of grunt work between the creative projects." "I understand," I assured her, though my heart was racing. "I'm ready for this." After we hung up, I sat staring at the wall, equal parts terrified and exhilarated. I was really going to do this, uproot my life, and move across the country. I pulled up Google Maps and traced the route from Boston to Portland. 3,073 miles. A continent away from the family that had never had space for me. When I told Frank my plans, his bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise. Diana Vega's workshop? That's big league, kiddo. She's brilliant, but demanding as hell. I need this, Frank, I said, helping him clamp a tabletop he was gluing. I need to see if I can make it on my own terms. He studied me for a long moment, his blue eyes sharp under those wild eyebrows. You're running away, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I'm running toward something, I countered. There's a difference. Frank sighed, wiping glue from his hands. Problems have a way of following you, Jess. Even 3,000 miles might not be far enough if you're not addressing what's really bothering you. What's bothering me is that I've spent my whole life trying to be smaller, to take up less space, to apologize for my existence, I said, the words tumbling out. I need to find out who I am when I'm allowed to expand. Frank nodded slowly. All right, I get that. He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a wooden case I'd never seen before. Inside, nestled in red velvet, was a set of Japanese chisels, their blue steel blades catching the light. I was saving these for a special occasion. Guess this qualifies. Frank, I can't, I started, knowing how valuable and personal tools were to a woodworker. You can and you will, he said gruffly. Every craftsperson needs the right tools. Besides, he added with a wink, you can send me a fancy cutting board or something from Portland when you're settled. I looked down at the map on my phone, the blue lines stretching across the country, and felt a surge of determination. Leaving would be hard, but for the first time in my life, I was choosing my own path instead of trying to fit into the narrow space my family had allocated for me. I waited a week before telling my family about my plans. Part of me hoped that putting some distance between the disastrous dinner and my announcement would make them more receptive. Another part was simply gathering courage. I chose Sunday dinner, another Mitchell family tradition. This time, I arrived prepared, with a folder containing my acceptance letter, information about Northwest Artisan Woodworks, and a budget I'd worked out for the move. I'd even practiced what I would say, anticipating their objections and preparing reasonable responses. My mother answered the door, perfect as always, in pressed slacks and a cashmere sweater despite it being a casual family dinner. Jessica, you're early, she said, checking her watch. We're not eating for another hour. I wanted to talk to everyone before dinner, I explained, following her into the kitchen where she was preparing a roast chicken. The smell of rosemary and lemon filled the air, achingly familiar. About what? She asked absently, basting the bird with practiced movements. I'll explain when everyone's here. My father was in his study, reviewing work documents even on a Sunday. Amber arrived 15 minutes late, as usual, bringing a bottle of wine that my father praised extravagantly. My cousin Rachel was there too, which I hadn't expected but welcomed. Rachel was the family outlier. Besides me, she'd chosen to become a social worker instead of pursuing the business or law careers the Mitchell family typically favored. Once we were all seated in the living room with pre-dinner drinks, I took a deep breath and jumped in. I've been accepted to an apprenticeship program at Northwest Artisan Woodworks, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's in Portland, Oregon. I'll be leaving in 3 weeks. The silence that followed was broken by my mother, who laughed lightly as if I'd told a mildly amusing joke. Oregon? Don't be ridiculous. Jessica. I'm not being ridiculous, I said, pulling out the acceptance letter. It's a prestigious program. They only take 2 apprentices each cycle. My father set down his scotch with deliberate care. And what exactly does this prestigious program pay? I'd anticipated this question. There's a monthly stipend. It's not much, but I've saved enough to cover the difference for the 6-month commitment. And there's potential for a permanent position afterward. A stipend, he repeated flatly. So you'll be making less than you do now, which is already barely enough to cover that shoebox apartment you rent. Richard, my mother admonished softly, though whether she was objecting to his tone or his blunt assessment of my financial situation wasn't clear. The experience and training are worth more than the salary, I explained. Diana Vega is one of the most respected woodworkers in the country. Amber, who had been scrolling through her phone, looked up. Wait, you're serious about this? You're really going to drop everything and move across the country to make furniture? The way she said make furniture like it was a child's hobby rather than a skilled craft made my jaw tighten. Yes, I am. That's brave, Amber said, in the same tone she might use to describe someone's questionable fashion choice, throwing away stability for a passion project. It's not a passion project, I corrected. It's a career path, one that I'm good at and that fulfills me. Fulfillment doesn't pay the bills, my father interjected. This is another one of your phases, Jessica. Like the photography, or the theater sets, or that time you wanted to design greeting cards. Each example hit like a small slap. Those weren't phases, they were explorations, attempts to find where my creativity fit in a world that valued conventionality. That they saw them as evidence of flightiness rather than a consistent thread of artistic pursuit said more about their perception than my choices. This isn't a phase, I said firmly. I've been woodworking for 3 years now. Frank says I have real talent. And who is Frank to judge? My mother asked, her smile tight. Some local hobbyist? He's a master craftsman with 48 years of experience, I replied, heat rising in my cheeks. His work is in collections across New England. My father waved a dismissive hand. Let's be realistic, Jessica. You'll be back when you run out of money or when the novelty wears off. Why not save yourself the trouble and stay here? Frank can continue teaching you. And you can keep your steady job. Rachel, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I think it sounds like an amazing opportunity, Jess. Portland is supposed to be a really creative city. My mother turned to her with a frosty smile. Rachel, dear, you always encourage her crazy ideas. Not everyone is suited to conventional success, of course. But there's no need to push Jessica further off track. Something in me snapped. The condescension, the dismissal. The way they talked about me as if I weren't sitting right there, it was too much. Off track? I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. What track would that be, Mother? The one where I force myself into a corporate job I hate? Where I compete with Amber for your approval and always come in second? Or maybe the track where I keep making myself smaller and smaller until I disappear entirely? Silence fell over the room. My mother's eyes widened in shock. My father's narrowed in displeasure. And Amber looked genuinely confused, as if the idea that I might resent my role in the family had never occurred to her. Jessica, my mother finally managed. What has gotten into you? Nothing has gotten into me, I said, the dam breaking after years of holding back. I'm finally seeing clearly. Do you have any idea what it's been like growing up as the family disappointment? Having every interest dismissed, every accomplishment minimized? We've always supported you, my father said stiffly. No, you've always tolerated me, I corrected. There's a difference. Last week at dinner, when I spilled my water and you said I've always taken up too much space, everyone laughed. Do you know how that felt? We were just joking, Amber said, though she had the grace to look uncomfortable. You're being way too sensitive. That's the problem, you're always just joking, and I'm always too sensitive. Has it ever occurred to you that your jokes are actually cruel? That maybe the problem isn't my sensitivity but your lack of it? My mother's face had gone pale. We only want what's best for you, Jessica. No, you want what's easiest for you, I corrected. Tears threatening but held in check by anger. And that's a daughter who doesn't challenge your worldview, who doesn't remind you that success comes in forms other than corner offices and promotions. I stood up, gathering my folder with shaking hands. I'm going to Portland. I'm going to take up all the space I need there. You can support that decision or not, it doesn't actually matter anymore. I walked out, the sound of my mother calling my name fading as I reached the front door. Outside, the cool evening air hit my flushed face, and I gulped it in, feeling simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. Footsteps sounded behind me, and I turned to see Rachel hurrying down the front steps. Jess, wait, she called. When she reached me, she pulled me into a tight hug. That was the most badass thing I've ever seen, she whispered. I laughed shakily against her shoulder. I think I just nuked my relationship with the entire family. Rachel pulled back to look at me. Maybe. Or maybe you just forced them to see you clearly for the first time. She squeezed my arm. I'm proud of you. And I want regular updates from Portland, okay? At least one text a week. I promise, I said, wiping my eyes. Thank you for having my back in there. Always, she replied. Now go build something beautiful in Oregon, something that takes up all the damn space you want." As I drove away, I saw my family framed in the bay window, my parents standing stiffly side by side, Amber slightly apart, all watching me leave. For once, I didn't feel the need to look back. 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparations. I sold most of my furniture, donated clothes I rarely wore, and packed my car with essential tools and the few possessions I couldn't bear to part with. My apartment, which had never felt particularly homey, looked eerily empty with the echo of my footsteps against bare floors. Frank helped me sort through my tools, advising on what was worth taking and what could be replaced once I reached Portland. On my last day at Riverside Woodworking, he presented me with a road atlas. "I know you've got GPS on your phone," he said gruffly, "but technology fails. Paper doesn't." Inside the front cover, he'd written, "The journey matters as much as the destination. Take your time. Make something worth the distance." Frank. I hugged him tightly, this gruff old man who'd shown me more genuine support than my own father ever had. "I'll make you proud," I promised. "Already have, kiddo," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Now get going before I start blubbering like an old fool." The first day on the road was surreal. As I passed the Leaving Massachusetts sign, a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged began to lift from my shoulders. I'd plotted a northern route that would take me through upstate New York, across the Great Lakes region, through the northern plains, and finally over the Rocky Mountains to Oregon. In western Pennsylvania, I stopped at a small woodworking shop I'd found online. The owner, a woman in her 60s named Margaret, showed me around her workshop and insisted I stay for lunch. "Not many young women in fine woodworking," she observed, serving homemade soup at her kitchen table. "What drew you to it?" I found myself telling her about Frank, about the way working with wood grounded me in a way nothing else had. I didn't mention my family, but something in Margaret's gentle questioning told me she understood there was more to my cross-country journey than professional development. "Wood remembers," she said cryptically as I was leaving. "Every bend, every stress, every season of drought or plenty, it's all there in the grain." People are like that too, carrying their history in invisible patterns. The trick is to work with the grain, not against it. In Ohio, I stayed with Lily, a friend from college I hadn't seen in years. She was part of an artist collective that had converted an old warehouse into studios and living spaces. The creative energy of the place was infectious, so different from the buttoned-up environment I'd grown up in. "Stay a few days," Lily urged. "There's a spare room, and I know people would love to see your work." I was tempted, but something pulled me onward. "I need to keep moving," I explained. "But I'll visit on my way back east sometime." "Will you go back?" she asked, helping me load my car the next morning. The question caught me off guard. Would I? "I don't know," I admitted. "But it feels better to think of this as a journey rather than an exile." Lily hugged me tightly. "Sometimes you have to leave to find your way home, even if home ends up being somewhere completely new." In Nebraska, my car developed an ominous rattle. The check engine light came on as I pulled into a small town with exactly one mechanic. The shop was closed for the day, but a handwritten sign provided the owner's home number for emergencies. Jim, the mechanic, arrived in a battered pickup truck 20 minutes after I called. He was in his 50s with grease permanently embedded in the lines of his hands. After listening to the engine and peering underneath, he delivered his verdict: a loose heat shield and a minor oil leak. "I can fix it now if you're in a hurry, or first thing tomorrow if you want to find a motel for the night," he offered. "Tomorrow is fine," I said, suddenly aware of how tired I was after days of driving. "Can you recommend somewhere to stay?" The only motel in town had seen better days, but it was clean enough. As I checked in, the clerk, a bored teenager, warned me, "Just so you know, there's only one other guest tonight. Some trucker. But don't worry, my dad's the owner, and we live right behind the office." In my room, I double-checked the locks and wedged a chair under the doorknob, suddenly very aware of being a woman traveling alone. When heavy footsteps passed by my door around midnight, I held my breath until they continued down the hallway. In Boston, I'd never thought twice about my safety, but out here, vulnerable and anonymous, every shadow seemed potentially threatening. The next morning, Jim fixed my car in under an hour and charged me less than I'd expected. "Where you headed?" he asked as I paid. "Portland, Oregon. Long way from home," he observed. "That's kind of the point," I replied with a small smile. He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Well, drive careful. Wyoming's got some mean crosswinds this time of year." As I continued west, the landscape changed dramatically. The flat expanses of the Great Plains gave way to the rolling foothills, and then the majestic peaks of the Rocky Mountains. In Colorado, I visited a small carpentry museum that showcased traditional tools and techniques from the pioneer era. There was something humbling about seeing the rough-hewn furniture created by settlers with limited tools and materials, proof that creativity flourishes even in the most challenging circumstances. Throughout the journey, my phone buzzed with messages from home. My mother's texts grew increasingly frantic as the days passed. "Jessica, please call when you get this. Your father and I are worried about you. At least let us know you're safe." I responded with brief updates. "In Ohio, car's fine, I'm fine," but kept the conversation short. My sister's messages were a strange mix of support and resentment. "So brave of you to just take off like this. Hope you find what you're looking for. Mom's been crying. Thanks for that. Seriously though, your woodworking stuff is actually really good. Why didn't you ever say you were this talented?" I didn't have answers for her. How could I explain that I had said it many times, but no one had listened? Rachel was the only one I had real conversations with, sending her photos of stunning landscapes and quirky roadside attractions, receiving enthusiastic responses and genuine questions about my journey. After 7 days on the road, I crossed into Oregon. The landscape shifted again to lush greenery that seemed impossible after the arid regions I'd passed through. Portland welcomed me with a persistent drizzle, the gray skies somehow comforting rather than gloomy. I parked outside Northwest Artisan Woodworks, a converted industrial building in a neighborhood filled with similar spaces, former factories and warehouses now home to creative businesses and studios. Through large windows, I could see workbenches and machinery, people moving purposefully among projects in various stages of completion. For a moment, I sat watching, doubt creeping in. What if I wasn't good enough? What if I'd traveled 3,000 miles only to discover that my family had been right all along? Then I remembered Margaret's words about working with the grain, not against it. I'd been trying to work against my grain my entire life, forcing myself to fit into spaces too small for my natural patterns. Whatever happened next, at least I was finally allowing myself to expand into my natural shape. With that thought, I grabbed my portfolio and stepped out into the rain, ready to begin. Northwest Artisan Woodworks occupied the ground floor of a former textile factory. The high ceilings accommodated massive windows that flooded the space with natural light, even on a rainy day. The air smelled of sawdust, varnish, and coffee, a combination I already associated with creativity and possibility. Diana Vega met me at the door. She was shorter than I'd expected, maybe 5'4", but she commanded attention with an intensity that made her seem much larger. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she wore a canvas apron over jeans and a flannel shirt. No jewelry, minimal makeup, nothing that could get caught in machinery or distract from the work. "Jessica Mitchell," she said, extending a hand. Her handshake was firm and calloused. "You made it. How was the drive?" "Long," I admitted. "But worth it." She nodded once, as if she'd expected nothing less. "Let me introduce you to the team." The workshop was staffed with 6 full-time craftspeople, plus 3 apprentices, including me. Liam Chen was a few years older than me, with an easy smile and a background in architecture before he'd switched to furniture design. He'd been at Northwest for 9 months already, and showed me around with genuine enthusiasm. "Diana seems tough at first," he confided as we toured the facility, "but she's actually amazing. Just don't waste her time or make excuses, and you'll be fine." Tyler Reeves was the other apprentice, tall and lanky with carefully styled hair that seemed at odds with the workshop environment. His handshake was a little too firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Harvard graduate, he mentioned within the first 2 minutes of our introduction. I was on a corporate track, but decided to pursue something more authentic. The way he said it made it clear he considered himself exceptional for choosing craft over commerce, as if he deserved special recognition for walking away from a more prestigious path. It reminded me uncomfortably of my own family's values. My first week was exhausting but exhilarating. Diana started me on basic tasks, milling lumber, preparing surfaces, assisting the senior craftspeople with their projects. My hands blistered despite the calluses I'd already built up in Frank's workshop. The hours were long, the work physically demanding, and Diana's standards impossibly high. "Do it again," she said on my third day, examining a series of practice dovetail joints I'd cut. "Your layout is sloppy, and you're rushing the saw cuts." I redid the joints 3 times before she nodded with grudging approval. "Better. Now do 20 more to really get it in your muscle memory." Meanwhile, I was struggling to find affordable housing. Portland's rental market was more expensive than I'd anticipated, and my savings wouldn't stretch as far as I'd hoped. After a week in a hostel, I found a room in a shared house with 3 roommates. Zoe, a barista and textile artist. Marcus, a grad student in environmental science. And Danny, a bike courier and part-time DJ. The house was an old Victorian divided into awkward spaces. My room barely large enough for a twin bed and a small desk, but it was within biking distance of the workshop and just within my budget. "You're a woodworker?" Zoe asked when I moved in, helping me carry a box of books upstairs. "That's so cool. We've got a wobbly dining table that needs fixing." "I can look at it," I offered, grateful for the friendly welcome. My roommates were nothing like my family. They were creative, eccentric, supportive of each other's pursuits, however impractical they might seem from a conventional perspective. At the workshop, I was slowly finding my rhythm. Diana assigned each apprentice a small personal project alongside our regular duties. Mine was a jewelry box with complex inlay work, something to showcase fine detail skills. "Your designs have potential," Diana told me, reviewing my sketches. "But your technical execution needs refinement. Focus on precision first, then you can get more creative." I threw myself into the project, staying late after regular hours to practice techniques and refine details. Liam often stayed too, working on a rocking chair with sculpted arms that seemed to flow like water. "You're catching on fast," he commented one evening, watching me work on a particularly tricky bit of inlay. "Most people take months to develop that kind of touch." "I had a good teacher back in Boston," I said, thinking of Frank. "And I'm motivated." "Running toward something or away from something?" he asked with surprising insight. I looked up, startled. "Both, I guess? Is it that obvious?" He shrugged. "Most people who move across the country solo are either chasing a dream or escaping a nightmare. Sometimes both." His smile was kind. No judgment either way. Tyler was less supportive. He'd taken to critiquing my work whenever Diana wasn't around, pointing out minor flaws with false concern. "Just trying to help," he'd say with that same non-reaching smile. "Diana expects perfection, you know." One afternoon, I returned from lunch to find my carefully arranged tools in disarray, one of my favorite chisels with a small nick in the blade. When I confronted Tyler, he raised his hands innocently. "Wasn't me. Maybe you should be more careful with your equipment." The incident bothered me more than it should have. It was minor. Really, tools got damaged, and the nick could be repaired with proper sharpening. But it triggered all my old insecurities. Was I not good enough? Was I taking up too much space here too? That night, I called Rachel, needing to vent to someone who understood. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this," I admitted, after describing the workshop dynamics. "Maybe I'm just not tough enough for this environment." "That's bullshit," Rachel said bluntly. "You stood up to Uncle Richard, which is basically like facing down a grizzly bear. This Tyler guy is just insecure because you're talented." "You don't know that I'm talented," I protested. "You've never even seen my work. I've seen the photos you've sent. That jewelry box is gorgeous already, and you said it's not even finished. Besides, would Diana have accepted you if you weren't good?" She had a point. Diana Vega didn't seem like someone who wasted time on lost causes. The next day, I arrived early at the workshop, determined to prove myself. I was at my bench, refining the lid of my jewelry box, when Tyler walked by and paused to watch. "Interesting design," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a compliment. Very feminine. Something in me snapped. I set down my tools carefully and turned to face him. Is there something specific you want to say, Tyler? Because these little passive-aggressive comments are getting old. His eyebrows shot up in feigned surprise. Just making conversation. No need to be so sensitive. There it was again, that familiar dismissal. You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. You're imagining things. The same gaslighting my family had perfected. I'm not being sensitive, I said firmly. I'm setting a boundary. If you have actual constructive criticism, I'm all ears. Otherwise, I'd appreciate if you kept your comments to yourself. He stared at me for a moment. Then his face hardened. Diana won't always be impressed with your little projects, you know. This isn't arts and crafts hour. Is there a problem here? Diana's voice cut through the tension. She had entered silently, a habit that kept everyone on their toes. No problem, I said, turning back to my work. Just a difference of opinion on design aesthetics. Diana looked between us, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Tyler, I need you in the finishing room. The Jacobson table needs another coat. After he left, she turned to me. Everything okay? Fine, I said automatically, then reconsidered. Actually, no. Tyler has been undermining me since I arrived. Yesterday, someone tampered with my tools. Diana's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. That's a serious accusation. I'm not officially accusing anyone, I clarified. I'm just stating facts. My tools were organized when I left for lunch, and they weren't when I returned. My chisel was damaged. She nodded once. I'll look into it. She started to walk away, then paused. Your jewelry box is coming along well. The inlay pattern is unconventional, but it works. Keep it up. Coming from Diana, this was effusive praise. I felt a small glow of pride that lasted the rest of the day. That night, I called Frank to update him on my progress. Diana said my inlay work is unconventional, but it works, I told him. He chuckled. High praise from the Ice Queen. I told you she'd recognize your talent. There's this other apprentice who seems determined to make me miserable, I admitted. There's always one, Frank said sagely. Best thing you can do is keep your head down and let your work speak for itself. Cream rises, kiddo. As I settled into my new life in Portland, I found myself growing in unexpected ways. I became more assertive, less willing to shrink myself to accommodate others. My roommates introduced me to their friends, and I began developing a social circle separate from work. I discovered a farmer's market within walking distance of our house, and the joy of fresh produce after years of surviving on takeout and frozen meals. I started running in a nearby park, the physical exertion clearing my mind after long days at the bench. The city itself felt like an ally in my transformation. Portland embraced the unconventional, celebrated the handmade and the homegrown. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was fighting against the current of societal expectations. Here, pursuing craft over corporate success wasn't seen as a failure, but as a valid, even admirable choice. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I sat on our house's sagging front porch with Zoe, sharing a bottle of local wine. You seem different from when you first moved in, she observed. More present. How do you mean? She gestured vaguely with her glass. When you arrived, you had this energy of someone who was still halfway somewhere else. Like you were looking over your shoulder. Now you seem more grounded. I considered this. I guess I am. I've spent most of my life trying to prove myself to people who were never going to see me clearly. It's exhausting, living like that. And now? She prompted. I smiled, surprising myself with how genuine it felt. Now I'm just trying to see myself clearly. Everything else is secondary. Later that night, I lay awake thinking about Zoe's observation. I was changing, becoming more authentically myself with each passing day. The question was whether this new self would ever be compatible with the family I'd left behind, or if the 3,000 miles between us would become a permanent separation not just in distance, but in worlds and values as well. 6 months into my Portland life, I'd established a rhythm that felt both challenging and sustainable. My jewelry box had been completed and earned Diana's approval, leading to more complex assignments. I'd made friends beyond my roommates, including a regular game night with Liam and some of the other workshop employees. I'd even started dating casually, nothing serious, but enough to remind me that there was life beyond work. My relationship with Tyler remained strained but manageable. He'd backed off somewhat after Diana's intervention, limiting himself to occasional snide remarks when supervisors weren't around. I'd learned to ignore him, focusing instead on the growing confidence I felt in my abilities. One Wednesday afternoon, Diana called me into her office. "The Morrisons need a custom entry table," she said, without preamble. "Narrow console style, quarter-sawn white oak. They liked your inlay work on the Peterson cabinet. I'm giving you lead on the design, with Liam assisting on construction." I blinked, processing this. The Morrisons were important clients, a wealthy couple who had commissioned several major pieces from Northwest. This was a significant opportunity. "Thank you," I managed. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Diana said, matter-of-factly. "Initial sketches by Friday, please." I spent that evening developing concepts, losing track of time as I explored different design possibilities. Around 11, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Call me when you get a chance. Kind of important." I called immediately, worried something had happened back home. "Hey," Rachel answered, her voice hushed. "Are you alone?" "Yes," I said, concern mounting. "What's wrong? Is everyone okay?" "Everyone's fine," she assured me. "But I found out something you should know. Your sister has been in contact with someone at your workshop. Someone named Tyler." My blood ran cold. "What? How do you know this?" "I was at your parents' house for dinner last weekend, and Amber was talking about getting inside information about how you're doing. She mentioned this guy's name, said she found him through the workshop's website and reached out." "What exactly did she say?" I asked, my mind racing. Rachel hesitated. "She said she's been telling him about your vulnerabilities. Things that might help him keep you in check," were her exact words. "I think she meant it as looking out for you, in her twisted way. But it sounded really manipulative." The pieces clicked into place. Tyler's targeted comments, the way he seemed to know exactly which buttons to push. Did she say what kind of information she gave him? Something about you being sensitive to criticism about taking up space? And about how you always quit when things get tough? Jess. I shut her down as soon as I realized what was happening, but the damage is already done. I thanked Rachel and hung up, my excitement about the Morrison Commission completely forgotten. My own sister had deliberately undermined me, arming a colleague with personal information to use against me. The betrayal cut deep, reopening wounds I thought had begun to heal. The next morning, I arrived at the workshop early, determined to confront Tyler before the day began. I found him at his bench, methodically sharpening his chisels. "I know you've been talking to my sister," I said without preamble. He looked up, momentarily startled before his face settled into a smirk. "Ah." The golden child finally spilled the beans. "Why?" I demanded. "What could you possibly gain from sabotaging me?" Tyler set down his stone and chisel carefully. "It wasn't personal at first. Diana never takes more than 2 apprentices at a time, and there's usually only one permanent position that opens up. I figured any edge I could get would be worth it. So you contacted my family through the website?" "Actually, your sister contacted me. Said she was worried about you and wanted someone to keep an eye on you." His smile was cold. "She had a lot of interesting insights about what makes you tick. How you always needed the spotlight growing up. How you'd start projects with big talk and abandon them when they got difficult." Every word was like a physical blow. I'd expected Amber to dismiss my woodworking, perhaps even to resent the attention my leaving had generated, but actively sabotaging my new life? That was a level of betrayal I hadn't anticipated. "She was wrong," I said, working to keep my voice steady. "And so are you." "Am I?" he challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, you're one tough critique away from packing up and heading back to Boston with your tail between your legs. Just like your family said you would. What's going on here?" Diana's voice cut through our confrontation. She stood in the workshop entrance, eyes moving between us with sharp assessment. Tyler's demeanor changed instantly, the smirk replaced with a neutral expression. "Just discussing design approaches for the Morrison table. Jessica has some interesting ideas." Diana clearly didn't believe him, but before she could respond, I felt something break inside me. Months of stress, of rebuilding myself while fighting against both old and new undermining forces, culminated in a moment of complete emotional overwhelm. To my horror, I burst into tears. I rushed past Diana and out the back door of the workshop, gasping for air in the small employee courtyard. I heard the door open behind me and turned, expecting Tyler and preparing a furious dismissal. Instead, it was Diana, her usual stern expression replaced with something that looked almost like concern. "Take a breath," she instructed, standing awkwardly nearby. "Then tell me what's actually happening." Between shuddering breaths, I explained about Tyler's connection with my sister, the sabotage, the deliberate targeting of my insecurities. Diana listened without interruption, her face giving nothing away. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Personal drama has no place in my workshop," she finally said. I braced myself for dismissal, for confirmation that I wasn't tough enough for this environment after all. "Instead," she continued, "but neither does sabotage. I've noticed Tyler's behavior, and it's been concerning. This explains a lot." She leaned against the brick wall of the building, arms crossed. "My father was a master cabinet maker," she said unexpectedly. "Traditional to the core. Didn't believe women belonged in woodworking. When I expressed interest, he tried to steer me toward appropriate pursuits. When that didn't work, he tried to break me, criticizing everything I made, setting impossible standards, telling me I was wasting my time." I stared at her, surprised by this personal revelation from someone who kept such professional distance. "I left home at 18, she continued, apprenticed with his rival. Didn't speak to my family for 12 years. When I won my first major commission, my father finally reached out. Said he was proud of me." She shook her head. "Too little, too late. I accepted his apology but kept my distance. Some bridges stay burned." She straightened, professional demeanor returning. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I recognize what you're going through. The difference is, you have talent worth fighting for. Don't let Tyler or your family take that from you." Back inside, Diana called Tyler into her office. Their meeting lasted 20 minutes, after which Tyler emerged looking shaken. He cleared out his personal items and left without speaking to anyone. Later, Diana simply told the team, "Tyler has decided to pursue other opportunities." That evening, my phone lit up with messages from my family. Rachel had been right about them tracking my social media. Someone had seen a post from the workshop's account featuring my jewelry box and shared it with them. From my mother, "Jessica, please call us. We haven't heard from you in weeks. Are you eating properly? Portland is so damp, make sure you're taking vitamin D." From my father, "Saw your box online. Surprised you've stuck with this woodworking thing. Call your mother, she's worried." From Amber, "That jewelry box is actually really beautiful, Jess. Always knew you had potential. When are you coming to visit?" I stared at the messages, feeling strangely hollow. After discovering Amber's betrayal, the transparent attempts at connection felt not just insincere but actively harmful. I set my phone aside without responding. Later that night, I called Rachel, who confirmed what I already suspected. My family had been discussing my woodworking phase extensively, making fun of my playing carpenter in group text conversations. She'd been accidentally included in one such thread and had been horrified by their dismissive attitude. "I'm so sorry, Jess," she said. "I should have told you sooner." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "Honestly, I'm not even that surprised. Just disappointed." As I lay in bed that night, I considered my options. I could confront my family, call them out for their behavior. I could try to explain, once more, how their treatment had affected me. I could even pack it all in, admit defeat, and return to Boston with some story about the apprenticeship ending early. Instead, I got up and went to my small desk, pulling out my sketchbook and pencils. If my family wanted to see me fail, wanted confirmation that I was just playing at being a craftsperson, the best revenge would be success on my own terms. I began sketching a new piece, not the Morrison Commission, but something personal. A table, but unlike anything I'd designed before. As the concept took shape on paper, I felt a sense of purpose solidify within me. This table would tell my story. The journey across the country, the breaking of old patterns, the building of something new and strong. It would incorporate wood from each state I'd traveled through, a physical manifestation of the distance I'd put between myself and the family that couldn't make space for me. And it would be beautiful, undeniably well-crafted, impossible to dismiss as a hobby or a phase. Around 2 in the morning, I made a decision. I would cut contact with my family entirely, at least for now. No more brief text updates, no more fielding their calls when I felt guilty. Complete separation while I focused on building not just furniture, but a life where I could thrive. The design for the table continued to evolve under my pencil, becoming more than just a piece of furniture. It was a declaration of independence, a reclaiming of space, both literal and figurative. By the time dawn broke over Portland's misty skyline, I had the complete design mapped out, along with a renewed sense of determination. If Tyler and my family thought I would break under pressure, they were about to be proven very wrong. 1 year after leaving Boston, I barely recognized the person I'd been. The Jessica who had shrunk herself to fit into spaces others allocated for her seemed like a distant relative rather than a former self. My apprenticeship had officially ended 3 months earlier, but Diana had offered me a position as a junior craftsperson at Northwest, with a modest but livable salary and the opportunity to develop my own designs alongside commissioned work. My table project had evolved from late-night sketches to a tangible reality. Diana had recognized something special in the design and granted me permission to work on it between other projects. "Consider it a thesis piece," she'd said. "Something that defines your voice as a craftsperson." The table was a console design, meant to sit against a wall in an entryway or hallway. Its silhouette was simple and clean, with subtle curves that made it appear almost weightless despite its solid construction. The top was my masterpiece, a map of my cross-country journey inlaid in contrasting woods. I'd sourced timber from each state I'd passed through: maple from Massachusetts, cherry from Pennsylvania, walnut from Ohio, ash from Nebraska, pine from Wyoming, juniper from Idaho, and finally, Oregon oak. The table's base incorporated another special feature: a hidden compartment activated by a precisely fitted sliding panel. Inside, I placed small mementos from my journey: a pressed leaf from the park where I'd stopped for lunch in New York, a stone from the shore of Lake Michigan, a postcard from the Colorado Carpentry Museum, a small wood shaving from my first project in Portland, physical reminders of the distance I'd traveled, both geographically and emotionally. Liam had been supportive throughout the project, offering technical advice when I hit challenges and genuine enthusiasm as the piece took shape. Our friendship had deepened into something more over the months. We'd been dating for 4 months now, taking things slowly, both of us aware that my roots in Portland were still new and potentially fragile. "It's beautiful, Jess," he said one evening, running his hand along the finished tabletop. "Diana's right, this is definitely your voice." "You don't think it's too personal?" I asked, still harboring insecurities about creating something so emotionally significant. "That's what makes it powerful," he replied. "The best pieces always contain something of their maker. That's the difference between craft and manufacturing." Diana was equally impressed. "The technical execution is excellent," she said, examining the joinery with her characteristic thoroughness. "And the concept is strong. Different from your other work, more narrative, more intimate, but that's not a criticism." She straightened up, fixing me with her direct gaze. "I want to display it at the Pacific Northwest Craft Exhibition next month." The exhibition was a prestigious annual event showcasing the finest craftsmanship from the region. Having a piece selected was an honor, especially for someone just beginning their professional career. "Are you serious?" I asked, stunned. "I don't joke about exhibitions," Diana replied dryly. "It's ready. You're ready." Preparation for the exhibition consumed the next few weeks. I put final touches on the table, adjusting the finish, refining details, creating display materials that explained the concept without over-explaining the personal significance. Diana coached me on how to discuss my work with potential clients and collectors, emphasizing the importance of letting the piece speak for itself rather than apologizing or over-elaborating. "Never diminish your work," she advised. "If someone asks about the price, tell them confidently. No hedging, no justifications. You've put hundreds of hours of skilled labor into this piece. Own that. A week before the exhibition, an unexpected email arrived in my inbox. The subject line read "Your Table," and it was from William Torres, editor of Northwest Artisan, a well-respected regional magazine focusing on craft and design. He'd seen photos of my table during a preview visit to the workshop and wanted to feature it in their upcoming issue. The resulting article, titled "Journey Mapped in Wood," included professional photographs of the table, along with an interview where I discussed my approach to woodworking and my path to Portland. I carefully avoided mentioning my family dynamics, focusing instead on the mentorship I'd received from Frank and Diana and the technical challenges of the inlay work. The article went live online 3 days before the exhibition opened. Within hours, it had been shared widely within the woodworking community, garnering positive comments and inquiries about my other work. The response was overwhelming and validating, especially when Frank called to tell me he'd seen it shared in several East Coast woodworking forums. "You've made a splash, kiddo," he said proudly. "Always knew you had it in you." That evening, as Liam and I celebrated with dinner at a small neighborhood restaurant, my phone began buzzing with notifications. I ignored it until we'd finished eating, then checked to find multiple messages from my family. My mother had written a lengthy text about how proud she was to see my hobby featured in a magazine, though she questioned whether the modern style would have lasting appeal. My father's message was briefer. "Interesting article. Business seems to be going well." And from Amber, a strange mix of congratulations and competitiveness. "Nice write-up. Reminds me of when I was featured in Marketing Monthly last year. We should compare notes sometime." Most surprising was a voicemail from my father. "Jessica, your mother and I have been discussing making a trip out to Portland. We'd like to see this exhibition of yours. Amber might join us as well. Let us know if that would be acceptable. We could book flights for next weekend." I stared at my phone, a knot forming in my stomach. After months of minimal contact, after discovering Amber's betrayal, they wanted to simply show up and insert themselves into this milestone moment? The old Jessica might have acquiesced, grateful for any acknowledgement from her family. The new Jessica felt something different. Anger, yes, but also a clear-eyed assessment of the boundary violation this represented. "Bad news?" Liam asked, noting my expression. "My family wants to come to the exhibition," I said, still processing the implications. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" he asked cautiously. I'd told him bits and pieces about my family situation, enough that he understood it was complicated. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "A year ago, I would have been desperate for their approval. Now, I don't know if I want them there at all." He covered my hand with his. "Whatever you decide, I've got your back. So does Diana. And everyone at the workshop." I nodded, grateful for this reminder of the support system I'd built. "Thank you. I need to think about it." That night, I sat on my apartment's small balcony. I'd moved out of the shared house 2 months earlier, looking over the lights of Portland and contemplating my options. I could refuse to see my family, maintaining the boundaries I'd established. I could agree to meet them somewhere neutral, away from the exhibition, keeping my professional and personal lives separate. Or I could allow them to attend, to see firsthand the person I'd become when freed from their limiting expectations. After careful consideration, I texted my father. "The exhibition opens Friday evening at 7. If you decide to come, I'll put your names on the guest list. No additional welcome, no offer to show them around Portland or spend time together outside the event. Just the basic information they would need if they chose to attend." Setting a boundary while leaving the door slightly ajar. The morning of the exhibition, I arrived early to help with final setup. My table was positioned in a prime spot near the center of the gallery, angled to catch the light from overhead fixtures. A small placard provided my name and the title I'd chosen, "Distance and Displacement: A Journey in Wood." Diana appeared beside me as I made a final adjustment to the table's placement. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "Not just about the exhibition. My family might be coming." She raised an eyebrow. "The same family that drove you across the country?" I nodded. "My father called. They saw the magazine article." Diana considered this. "Well, they'll see excellent work. Whether they understand what went into creating it, both technically and emotionally, is up to them. She squeezed my shoulder briefly. A rare physical gesture from her. Remember, you built this. All of it. The table. Your skills. Your life here. No one can take that from you. The exhibition opened at 7, and by 7:30, the gallery was filled with people examining the various pieces on display, talking with craftspeople, sipping wine from compostable cups. I stationed myself near my table, answering questions about the inlay technique and the wood selection, trying not to anxiously scan the entrance for my family. At 8:15, they arrived. My father, looking uncomfortable in the casual creative crowd despite his expensive sweater and slacks. My mother, immaculately put together as always, eyes darting around with barely concealed judgment. And Amber, dressed as if for a corporate networking event rather than an art exhibition. I saw them before they saw me, giving myself a moment to steel my nerves. They looked so out of place here, like visitors from another world, which, in a way, they were. The world of corporate success and conventional achievement, of straight lines and clear hierarchies, seemed foreign among the organic forms and creative energy of the exhibition. Finally, my mother spotted me and nudged my father. They made their way through the crowd, stopping a few feet from where I stood beside my table. "Jessica," my mother said, leaning in for an awkward hug that I returned stiffly. "You look different." Her eyes took in my simple linen dress, my hair cut in a short practical style, the wooden earrings I'd made myself. "It's been a year," I replied neutrally. "Things change." My father cleared his throat. "Interesting venue," he commented, glancing around. "Very artistic." Amber stepped forward to examine my table, her expression unreadable. "This is what was in the magazine," she observed. "It's actually quite striking in person." "Thank you," I said, unable to determine if her comment was genuine appreciation or backhanded praise. An awkward silence fell. I made no effort to fill it, a small act of resistance against my lifelong pattern of smoothing over family discomfort. Finally, my father spoke. "Your mother and I thought we might take you to dinner after this. Catch up properly." "I can't leave the exhibition," I explained. "I'm expected to stay until closing to speak with potential clients. Diana, my boss, has already arranged a group dinner afterward for the craftspeople. Surely you could make an exception," my mother pressed. "We've come all this way. The old guilt tactics, right on cue. But they hit differently now, like arrows bouncing off newly forged armor." "I have professional obligations here," I said firmly. "But we could perhaps meet for breakfast tomorrow, if you're staying overnight." Before they could respond, a well-dressed couple approached the table. "Is this your work?" the woman asked me. "Yes," I replied, shifting into professional mode. "It's a console table with an inlay map depicting a cross-country journey. The craftsmanship is exceptional," the man said, bending to examine the joinery. "Especially the inlay detail. Are these different wood species?" As I explained the technical aspects of the piece, my family stood awkwardly to the side, watching this interaction where I was clearly the expert, the artist, the professional. When the couple asked about pricing a number that would have seemed astronomical to me a year ago but that Diana had assured me was appropriate, my father's eyebrows shot up in surprise. After the couple moved on, promising to return after viewing the rest of the exhibition, my father turned to me with new assessment in his eyes. "That's substantial money for a table." "It's not just a table," I replied evenly. "It's an original design, handcrafted from select hardwoods, with over 200 hours of skilled labor involved. The price reflects that." He blinked, clearly taken aback by my confidence. "Jessica!" Diana's voice called from across the room. She approached with a distinguished-looking man in tow. "Ian Blackwood is interested in commissioning a dining table based on your inlay technique. Could you join us for a few minutes?" "Of course," I replied, then turned to my family. "Please excuse me. Business." As I walked away, I heard my mother murmur to my father, "She seems so different." Indeed I was. The table that stood between us represented not just my skill as a woodworker, but the emotional distance. I'd traveled 3,000 miles and a lifetime away from the person they'd tried to make me become. The morning after the exhibition, I met my family for breakfast at a small cafe near their hotel. The previous evening had ended with a significant sale. My table had been purchased by a prominent local collector for a sum that exceeded even Diana's optimistic estimate. The collector had been drawn to both the craftsmanship and the narrative quality of the piece, the physical manifestation of an emotional journey. I arrived at the cafe first, selecting a table by the window, where the morning light illuminated the reclaimed wood surfaces and locally made ceramic mugs. When my family entered, they looked as out of place as they had at the exhibition, my father in a business casual outfit more appropriate for a corporate retreat, my mother perfectly coordinated as always, Amber checking her phone with the focused intensity of someone who had more important places to be. "This is charming," my mother commented as they sat down, her tone making it clear this wasn't entirely a compliment. "Very Portland. They source everything locally," I explained. "The coffee is roasted 2 blocks away, and most of the food comes from within 50 miles of the city." My father picked up the menu, eyebrows rising at the descriptions of artisanal toast and heritage grain porridge. "No simple eggs and bacon? Try the breakfast bowl," I suggested. "It has eggs and bacon, plus greens and pickled vegetables. It's actually delicious." Once we'd ordered, an uncomfortable silence settled over the table. My family clearly expected me to carry the conversational water, as I'd always done before. Instead, I sipped my coffee and waited, refusing to fill the space with nervous chatter. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "The exhibition was impressive. Your table in particular." "Thank you," I said simply. "Did you really sell it for that much money?" Amber asked, setting down her phone. "Yes," I confirmed. "It was purchased by a local collector who specializes in Pacific Northwest craftspeople. That's more than I made in my first 3 months at Bradenton Financial," she said, a note of disbelief in her voice. "Different industries, different value systems," I replied with a small shrug. "In fine woodworking, pieces are priced based on design, originality, material quality, and labor hours, not just market comparables." My father leaned forward, business instincts engaged. "You should consider how to capitalize on this success. Perhaps a line of similar pieces, produced more efficiently to hit different price points. Volume is where the real money is." I shook my head. "That's not how this works. Each piece is unique, made by hand. The value is in the singularity, not the scalability." "Jessica," he said with the patient tone he used when explaining obvious business principles, "every enterprise needs to scale to be sustainable. You can't just—" "Dad," I interrupted firmly. "I appreciate the advice, but I don't need business consultation. Northwest has been operating successfully for 15 years. Diana understands the market and I trust her guidance on the business side." He looked startled, unused to being contradicted, especially by me. My mother jumped in, clearly attempting to smooth things over. "We're just trying to help, dear. We want you to succeed." "Do you?" I asked quietly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you want me to succeed only on your terms, in ways you understand and approve of." An uncomfortable silence fell again, broken only when our food arrived. As we began eating, my mother attempted to change the subject to safer territory. "Your apartment looks nice from the outside. Is it in a good neighborhood?" "It's perfect for me," I replied. "Walking distance to the workshop, close to good restaurants and shops. I can even see Mount Hood on clear days." "And is it permanent?" she asked tentatively. "Your situation here?" I set down my fork. "Mom, I'm not coming back to Boston. This isn't a phase or an extended vacation. I'm building a career and a life here." "But your family is in Boston," she protested. "And I have friends here, colleagues, a community that values me for who I am, not who they think I should be." My father frowned. "That's rather harsh, Jessica. We've always supported you." "Have you?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. Then, taking a deep breath, I continued. "Let's talk about something specific. Amber, did you contact Tyler Reeves at my workshop and share personal information about me?" Amber's eyes widened, her cheeks flushing. She glanced at our parents before answering. "I was worried about you," she said defensively. "You just took off across the country without a plan." I found him through the workshop website and reached out to make sure you were okay. By telling him about my insecurities? By suggesting ways to keep me in check? My voice remained calm despite the anger simmering beneath. I didn't say it like that, she protested. I just wanted someone to look out for you. Tyler used the information you gave him to undermine me professionally. He tampered with my tools. He nearly succeeded in driving me away from the best opportunity I've ever had. My parents looked shocked. Amber, is this true? My father demanded. I was trying to help, she insisted. Jessica has always been impulsive, starting things and not finishing them. I thought having someone watching out for her would be good. That wasn't your decision to make, I said quietly. And it's not an accurate assessment of who I am. It's who you've decided I am based on the family narrative. I turned to address all of them. Do you want to know why I left Boston? Why I felt I needed to put 3,000 miles between us? It was that dinner when Dad said I've always taken up too much space, and everyone laughed. But it wasn't just that moment, it was a lifetime of similar moments. Of being made to feel that my interests, my passions, my way of being in the world was somehow wrong or inconvenient. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We never meant to hurt you, Jessica. We were just joking. It wasn't funny to me, I said simply. And it wasn't just jokes. It was a pattern of dismissal and criticism that made me feel I had to make myself smaller to be acceptable. Do you know how exhausting that is? To constantly monitor yourself, to try to contain your existence so it doesn't inconvenience others? My father looked genuinely troubled. I never thought of it that way, he admitted. That's the problem, I replied. You never had to think about it. Your success, your interests, your way of moving through the world has always been supported and celebrated. Mine was tolerated at best, ridiculed at worst. We sat in silence for a moment. The weight of years of unspoken resentment finally laid bare. Then, to my surprise, my father did something I'd never seen before. He apologized without qualification. I'm sorry, Jessica, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've been unfair to you. We all have. You're right, we tried to fit you into a mold that worked for us without considering what you needed. Seeing your work last night, seeing how respected you are here, it's clear we've misjudged you, mistreated you. The simplicity and directness of the apology caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness, justifications, attempts to minimize my experience. Instead, for perhaps the first time, my father was seeing me clearly. Amber was less forthcoming. I still think I was trying to help, she insisted. But I'm sorry if it backfired. I didn't mean to sabotage you. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement, but it was a start. I nodded, accepting the partial apology for what it was. Where do we go from here? My mother asked tentatively. I considered the question carefully before answering. I don't know exactly. I'm not ready for regular family dinners or holiday gatherings yet. I need time and space to continue building my life on my own terms. But I'm open to staying in contact, to seeing if we can develop a healthier relationship. That sounds fair, my father said. We'd like to be part of your life, Jessica, even if it's different from what we imagined for you. We parted with tentative plans to talk more in the coming weeks, to begin the slow process of rebuilding bridges that had been badly damaged but perhaps weren't completely beyond repair. As they headed to the airport, I felt neither the vindication nor the relief I might have expected. Instead, I felt something quieter and more profound, a sense of having stood my ground while still leaving room for growth and change on all sides. In the months that followed, my life in Portland continued to flourish. My position at Northwest evolved to include more design responsibility and occasional teaching opportunities at community workshops. Liam and I moved in together, combining our tools and books in a slightly larger apartment with a spare room converted to a small design studio. I maintained cautious contact with my family, setting clear boundaries about the frequency and nature of our communication. My father made efforts to understand my work, asking questions about techniques and materials with genuine interest. My mother still occasionally slipped into old patterns, but was more receptive to being called out on them. Amber and I established a wary truce, our relationship thawing gradually through carefully neutral conversations about our respective careers. Rachel visited Portland twice, staying with Liam and me, delighting in the creative energy of the city and the community I'd built. "You belong here," she observed during her second visit. "I've never seen you so comfortable in your own skin." I continued to develop my craft, each piece building on the skills and aesthetic sensibility I'd established with my journey table. Diana, never one for effusive praise, acknowledged my growth with typical understatement. "You're making good work. Keep going." One afternoon, almost 2 years after leaving Boston, I received an email from a furniture design competition I'd entered months earlier. My entry, a rocking chair with a complex steam-bent back inspired by ocean waves, had won first prize in the Emerging Craftsperson category. The notification included congratulatory notes from the judges, praising the chair's ergonomic comfort and visual poetry. I sat in my design studio, surrounded by sketches and models of future projects, reading the email with a sense of quiet satisfaction. This recognition wasn't validation from my family or proof that I'd made the right choice in leaving. It was simply confirmation of what I already knew. I had found my place in the world, a place where I could expand to my natural dimensions without apology. The rocking chair had already been commissioned by a client and delivered to their home. But in my workshop at Northwest, another project was taking shape: a dining table for my apartment with Liam, large enough to seat 8 people comfortably. A table where friends could gather, where food and conversation could flow freely, where no one would ever be made to feel they were taking up too much space. As I closed the email and returned to my sketches, I thought about the distance I'd traveled, not just the 3,000 miles across America, but the emotional journey from a person who shrank herself to accommodate others to someone who claimed her rightful space in the world. The table I'd built in Portland wasn't just furniture, it was a declaration of independence, a reclaiming of space, a statement that I belonged exactly as I was. Have you ever had to physically or emotionally distance yourself from people who made you feel small? Did it lead to personal growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to take up space in this world. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Sometimes the tables worth building are 3,000 miles away from what you've always known.